Welcome to Universal Man. My name is Mark Webb, and I'm here to help you unleash your apex potential. And today I'm going to be covering a very important exercise that's usually just reserved for business executives and that sort of thing. But I'm going to be bringing it to you because if we learn how to utilize this technique properly, you can 10x, 100x, even 1000x the results that you get out of your effort toward your goals. You see, we live in a hard work culture today that says you just got to hustle, you just got to grind, you just got to put in that sweat. And as long as you do that, your dreams will come true. And yes, you do need to put in effort, but effort alone will not get you what you're looking for. You could work 80 hours a week at a, minimum wage job, and the only thing you could look forward to is maybe just a slight increase in pay over time if your boss likes you, right? Like, it's very possible to work very hard and get very poor results. And so if you want to escape that trap, you need to learn how to work with leverage. In other words, you need to learn how to do more with less. And this is the key to pretty much everything, right? And if you've ever found yourself in the hamster wheel of just feeling like you need to work harder in order to get what you want, well, maybe this is the video for you, because maybe it's not so much about working harder. It's about making the choices that will actually serve you better, focusing on the things that will give you far bigger results. Now, before we get started on today's topic, I want to take a second to tell you about a workshop that I'm going to be running later this week that perfectly complements the stuff that we will be covering in today's video. I've designed this workshop to solve the three biggest problems that I see guys on their path of personal development running into. So the first one would be jumping from goal to goal without any follow through and really getting any meaningful or lasting results. The second one would be trying to do too much, getting overwhelmed, and then just kind of bailing, relapsing, falling into the gutter and just abandoning everything, right? They just overwhelm themselves, burn themselves out. And then the third one would be focusing really hard on something, but then kind of getting imbalanced and having other stuff come crashing down because they put all their effort into one area. And I've personally struggled with all three of these things pretty intensely at different points in my life. But luckily, I've developed a system for cycling your goals and cycling your efforts so that you can have a sustainable method for creating and generating really strong progress with very little stress. It's actually a very peace-inducing process, which is, the antithesis of this whole work hard, grind mentality that many people feel like is the only option. Essentially, I want to tell you how to do it all, how to get everything that you want, but do it realistically. And so if this sounds like something that's interesting to you, well, then all you got to do is you got to sign up for the Universal Man Vanguard at the Elite tier, and you can get a link to that in the description below. All right, so let's get into it, my friends, okay? The core thing that we're going to be using in this video is the 80-20 principle. And I think most of you have probably heard of this. So here's a quick summary for those of you who maybe haven't, but we're going to go through this fast. The idea is that 80% of your efforts produce only 20% of your results, but then 20% of your efforts actually give you 80% of your results. It's basically like, the idea that not all effort is created equal. There's going to be a subset of your effort that is going to produce way more stuff than the bulk of your effort. And this is a principle that holds true across pretty much every domain. The numbers may not be exactly 80-20. It might be 70-30 or even 95-5, depending on the thing that we're looking at here. But the idea is that there's always going to be certain players, certain actions that have a disproportionate impact on the overall system. Like, for example, 20% of all basketball players in the NBA score 80% of the points, or 20% of all businesses make 80% of the money. It's just stuff like that. It's pretty straightforward. All right. So we got a smaller chunk that's disproportionately powerful, right? That's the 80-20 principle. This is important to us because that's what we're in the business of doing here, is we're trying to do more with less. And so what we essentially need to do is find that powerful few and learn how to leverage that with greater intensity and intentionality. Now, things get really interesting when you realize that the 80-20 principle is recursive. All right. So imagine we take that powerful 20% and then we run the principle again. So that means that 20% of that 20% is responsible for 80% of the 80%. Or in other words, there is a 4%, meaning 4%, which is 20% of the 20%. There's a 4% that produces around 64% of the results. All right. But we don't need to stop there. We can run it again. This means that there is a around 1%, it's actually, if we're going to round a little bit, there's a 1% that is producing about 50% of the results. All right. And a number of people have talked about this recursive nature of the 80-20 principle. And you can read all about it. Just Google it if you're interested. The one that I was most inspired by personally was David Finkel's book called The Freedom Formula. He has this whole thing called the time value matrix, which we'll put up here somewhere, that shows you how your time can be broken down into A time, B time, C time, D time. It's like A is that magic 1%. Then you've got your B time, which is like that 4%. Then you got C time, which is the 20. And then you got your D time, which is that 80% that only produces 20% of the results. And since people are always asking me to recommend books, this is a good one to check out. But where he applies this concept to business owners and helping them focus on the most valuable parts of their business, we're going to be applying this to your goals so that you can learn how to actually move your goal progress forward in a much more rapid way, even if you're just a regular average guy. So before we get into the ABCD, let's just talk very briefly about the F tier stuff. This is the stuff that is dysfunctional. This is the stuff that actually is very counterproductive. This is where all your vices and escapes and all this kind of stuff are. So, the porn addiction, the video game addiction, all the time, just scrolling Instagram, doing nothing, like whatever it is that you do. Obviously, we want to cut out that stuff as much as possible. And sometimes focusing on cutting that stuff out is actually maybe one of your top priorities. And so maybe you can apply this principle to the pursuit of that goal. If you want some more help with that kind of stuff, make sure you check out, my dopamine detox videos or the 10 commandments of, successfully doing a dopamine detox. Those kind of things will help you cut those bad habits out. We're not going to spend any more time on that, but that's a big topic. So let's get into how to begin triaging this stuff. All right. So you want to pick a goal. I'll cover a few different examples. I'll talk about a student. I'll talk about someone who wants to become an athlete. And then I'll talk about, me personally, and maybe just a few other comments in there. Just the idea is that if you can pick a goal, well, then you're going to be able to identify what behaviors are the most impactful and the least impactful, right? And that should be very useful to you. So for example, let's start with the D time stuff. A student, their D time activity, the stuff that's maybe they do a lot of but doesn't produce a ton of results. This might be stuff like studying or doing homework while they're also sort of surfing the internet, switching between their music and doing stuff like that. Maybe they studied or they did homework for like 3 hours, but in actuality, they only did a small amount of work because they were so distracted, and maybe the work that they did do was pretty low quality. Another example for a student might be going to a class that they sleep through. They put some effort going to the class, but they're not getting anything out of it. Or maybe the lecture is just terrible, and if they're going there and actually just trying to pay attention to the lecture and the lecture is terrible, maybe they should be doing something else at that time. Maybe they should show up at the class, but maybe they should be, doing something else at their desk. I don't know, but that would be an example of maybe D time for a student. For an athlete, it might be reading, articles and Instagram posts that just detail another fitness tip, or maybe they're obsessively researching and buying supplements. Like, these things, maybe every once in a while they'll get something good out of it, like a little gem here and there, but for the most part, it's kind of wasted effort that doesn't really move the needle on them becoming a better athlete. For me personally, I've done a pretty good job at least in my business of cutting out a lot of my D time. Maybe it's like email, like spending too much time like just on junk mail or something like that, like not having proper filters in place. So I gotta like wade through crap like that, or that's kind of thing, or doing something that one of my teammates should be doing, like responding too in depth to support requests. That would be D time on that level. But like in a personal thing, it might be, me playing video games or something like that when I have other things that are more important to me. So, basically like your D time is the stuff that in general you're going to be trying to phase out, that, you might think is helping, but actually is just creating the illusion of help, because in many ways it's just low leverage and not really, causing that big of an impact. So moving up a level, we get to the C tier sorts of effort. And this is the 20%. And you can think about this stuff as the activities that produce like true incremental gains, right? Like they actually help. They do important work. And you might actually spend a decent amount of time on this kind of stuff, but it's not the most impactful, okay? So for a student, this might be keeping up with the reading and maybe the smaller assignments that they have to do. Okay, like a homework thing might be worth 1/10 of your grade or something like that. And the reading, it's good. You got to you want to be up to date with it, but maybe that's not the most important thing. Maybe depending on the subject, that might be a massively important thing. But it kind of depends. For an athlete, like showing up and just doing something at the gym, if that might be a C tier activity, like going and just doing some kind of workout, keeping themselves in shape, like especially maybe it's the off season, just doing something is going to be better than nothing, right? Depending upon how advanced the athlete is kind of determines this, right? Like if they are someone who is a very high level professional athlete, just showing up and doing something, that might be D tier effort for them. But for someone who's just getting into working out, just getting into training, well, showing up and doing something, that might be even A tier activity if they're coming from nothing and they're setting, they're trying to go very, very slowly. But in general, let's say you're someone who works out regularly already, then just doing something in a haphazard manner, better than doing nothing. It's going to maintain something, matters a little bit. Let's put it in C. Okay. For me, with my business, C tier stuff would be putting out free content. Like putting out videos like this in many ways, like the daily videos, the emails, that kind of stuff. My weekly calls with the Vanguard. Okay, when I do those, not the workshops so much, more the weekly calls, like when I just talk to the guys and I coach them and do that sort of thing. It's good, it's important, but it's not super high leverage. I would even say my individual coaching clients who they pay a lot of money, it's still not super leveraged. I'm trading time for money. So that's C tier activity. It doesn't mean it's less important to me. It just means that it's less impactful. And maybe eventually, ideally, I would phase that out so that I could do something that is higher leverage, right? So that maybe I work with more group coaching. I do more group coaching, or I coach coaches or something like that, right? I just want to reiterate here that things can shift categories, because like for me, like putting out free content back when I first started my business, back when I first started coaching, that was like an A or a B level activity. But now that I've actually produced so much content and I could do way more work reusing what I've already created or finding more efficient ways of advertising or whatever than just having to constantly come up with new ideas, that decreases the value of doing this kind of stuff. So that's C tier. Now let's move our way up to B tier. This is the 4%. And this is the extremely highly leveraged sorts of activities that you can engage in. These things pack quite a wallop. They're very, very important. Now, you may not be able to do these all the time at first, but that's okay, because just a little bit of time into these produces huge amounts of results. So for example, for a student here, this might be something like taking the time to select or set up a study group, all right? Because once you got a study group going, maybe you could actually then have, one person, they outline and create a summary of this thing. Another person, they outline and create a summary of this thing. Then you pull your results and you can actually study far more efficiently. Just that time setting that up, talking to people, managing the back and forth or whatever, could do a huge amount for your overall efforts. Maybe creating a study program for themselves, a study schedule where they look at their semester and they create timelines and be like, all right, here I'm going to try and focus on this at this point, this at that point. I got to put this many hours here, whatever. Just taking that extra time to think that through so that they're putting the right amount of effort on the right thing, the right assignment. That could pay, massive dividends. Arguably, you could even put something like studying for big final exams in the B tier, because if your exam holds a disproportional amount of your grade, well then, maybe that's a big piece of it. Or maybe there's a big project that you got to work on. Maybe that's B tier activity for a student. For an athlete, it could be picking or designing their training program and then sticking to that training program. So this would be more structured effort that builds upon it. So there starts to be a more leveraged effect where each workout actually is enhanced by the previous workouts, and then they build towards something, so creating some more intense kind of change in your physical abilities or something like that. It could also be for an athlete developing a new skill set that allows for an entirely new paradigm of training that could be really beneficial. So for example, maybe you want to be a more explosive athlete. Maybe you're training for football or something like that, and you learn Olympic weightlifting. All right, it might take some effort to learn that, but if you do, well, that could increase power and strength and that sort of thing. It's just an example, but maybe you're someone who only knows how to jog and do push-ups. Well, learning just basic, gym and barbell lifts, that could be a massive upgrade and open up entirely new levels. That putting that effort into the YouTube, studying, maybe even like talking to someone, getting someone to show you some stuff, submitting some form videos to a subreddit or something like that. Yeah, it takes time. Big dividends, right? So for me, in my business, the things that would be B-level activity would be creating like reusable marketing content. So for example, if I make a new sales video for my Reforged Man course and I put a lot of effort into it and I know it's like really good, it's going to convert really well, doing something like that would be very high usage of my time, especially if I'm only doing it partially and mostly delegating it to my teammate. Okay, that would be a pretty highly leveraged sort of thing. Another thing would be maybe developing more cutting edge stuff that not only makes me money in the moment, but builds my ideas and processes toward a higher level product. That's essentially what my workshops are. My ongoing workshops for the Vanguard, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video. Those are things that I'm pushing my content, making good stuff, and I can sell it. I'm pitching it to you. I think it's really good stuff, but it also is building a body of work that I will eventually synthesize into another program. So I've got that's how I built my Reforged Man course, piece by piece by piece. But only this time I'm doing it in a way where I can sell it along the way. You see, it's this higher leverage, right? Other example of B time for me would be properly leading one of my team members, giving them direction so that they can do stuff that I don't then have to do, right? So hopefully this makes sense. B time's just, even more leverage. Now, when we take it up one more notch and we start looking at the A-level of activities, it starts to look sometimes a little bit different. You almost need to look at what you're trying to accomplish from a different perspective to find the 1%. At least that's the way it seems to me. So, for example, as a student, what would be the 1% for them? Well, maybe it would be something like adopting cutting-edge study methods, like taking the time to figure out what are the best study methods that exist today for internalizing and processing information, and learning them, and then learning how to implement them. Maybe, it would be the amount of effort that they put into their college application, because the college that you go to is probably going to have a bigger impact on your results that you're actually trying to get via academia than, maybe even just how hard you study, right? What if it's about picking, the time put into picking the right major, or even just picking the right professors? I remember there was a thing that was called ratemyprofessor.com when I was in college, and I knew that I learned my lesson. It's do your research, find the good professors, and if you have them, then the course itself becomes exponentially easier because they're good, they teach you well, all that kind of stuff. They have fair tests. And so, those things don't necessarily spring out to someone, right away who's a student trying to be a better student as like the top priority things, but maybe they are, like maybe forming a relationship with your professor is one of those things. It kind of depends on what you're trying to accomplish and where you're at in your academic career. For an athlete, probably one of the biggest things would be doing the research and trial of finding the right coach or team, right? Because if they can lock that person down, well, that person can then produce a tremendous amount of growth in them and also be incredibly inspiring. They can kind of delegate a lot of the difficult decision-making and motivational aspects to another person. And that could take them to an entirely different level, because then they have even more energy available for just simply doing the training. For me, A-level stuff would be creation of products that I can sell for years. Maybe high-level strategic planning and thinking, like working with my business coach, that kind of stuff. These are the things that are A-level activities for me at this point. And the thing to think about with A-level is that this stuff compounds. It means that it's a change. It creates something that can grow and grow and grow and grow. So if I create a new product, then not only do I have another product, it basically is an asset that the more energy or whatever that I dump into it, the more money it produces, right? This is not the same thing as, trading your time for money, right? Because when you trade your time for money, all you're doing is, you're kind of limited because you only have so much time. But if I can sell something passively, right, if you can scale that, well, then it just gives you more and more and more and more. And so this is all basic, business stuff that I'm sharing with you, but I'm trying to bridge the gap here between the business world and the practical stuff. And, it might be difficult for you at first to categorize this stuff. That's fine. If you can only get like a rough categorization, maybe you can just 2 categories, or even, 3 instead of 4, that's fine. That's fine. Just begin thinking about this. And as you start doing it, and as you keep monitoring it and you keep thinking in this direction, it's going to become more and more clear for you as to what are the things that are producing the big results. And the goal is to move each of these activities through different levels. Like your old D activities should likely be probably trying to phase them out. And then your C activities will then become D activities, and your old Bs will now become Cs. And then, you'll unlock entirely new As or entirely new Bs or whatever it is. It's like these things, they will shift and move. And that's the point. You're supposed to be moving to a higher and higher position of leverage where you're able to get more and more done and have greater and greater impact with less and less effort. But if you're not thinking like this, it doesn't happen magically. That's the thing, is it like I've been working in my business for years and trying to do this, but I just was not nearly intentional about it as I could have been and as I should have been. If I was, I know I'd be much further along financially and even in my ability to serve you guys. So that's why I'm doing whatever I can right now to improve my ability with this on the business side. But, I see the exact same potential for anyone who's trying to make any sort of significant change in their own life. So if you're having trouble doing this because you just got too many goals and you don't know how to categorize it, well, then that's really what that workshop I mentioned at the beginning of this video is about. It's going to teach you how to cycle through your goals, how to prioritize them so you know which ones to start, applying this highly leveraged effort to. This isn't something that's immediately obvious. It took me quite a few years to figure it out. And then it was like, boom, light bulb moment. So if you want to hear about how to do that, make sure you check out the link below and sign up for the Vanguard at the Elite tier. And I'll see you on Wednesday. But otherwise, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like, please subscribe, please leave a comment. That helps me out with the algorithm a lot. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much. Ooyap.